Hi, I'm Elizabeth, this is the Bookish North, and today I'm here with a video I'm super excited about. This is my first video for Sagalong 2020. And Sagalong is a read-along where we read, you guessed it, sagas, and we are a bunch of booktubers. I'm co-hosting this with 7 other people, which are Elena Macredina, Michael McGrath and Steve Donahue, who all share names with their channels. And we also have Mark from Richardson Reads, Lukash from Totally Pretentious, Tilly from Tilly's Shelf, and Jason from Byways in Bookland. And I will of course leave links to all of their channels down below so you can watch their videos about this as well. And then you have of course myself. So the saga that we are reading for the first 2 weeks of the month is Saga om Laxdøla in Norwegian. It's called Laxdæla Saga. I'm very bad at making an English pronunciation of that word. No matter, so we've read the first half of it for today, and then we're going to finish it off by next Saturday. And then for the last 2 Saturdays of the month, we are all going to read separate sagas. But I thought I would just start with giving you a few facts about the saga itself. It is assumed to have been written down between 1230 and 1260. But it depicts events happening much earlier, starting off in the 800s and ending slightly after the year 1000. The author is unknown, although it has been speculated that it might have been written by a woman because of the strong female characters in the story. It has also been suggested it might have been written by a man called Olaf Kviteskald, which was the nephew of Snorre Sturlason, but we will never know that for sure. It is written by anonymous. It is preserved in 7 different manuscripts. The oldest one, that is the complete version of the story, is called Mødrevala Bok, and this is the version that my translation, or rather my translations, is based on, because I have in fact been reading 2 different versions of the saga, both of them Norwegian translations. But as you may or may not know, Norwegian has 2 written standards, so I've read it both in Bokmål translation and also in a Nynorsk translation, which are the names of the 2 written forms. So this is my own copy. I have this as part of a 5-book box set of all the Icelandic sagas translated, and this is a modern translation. It is translated into sort of present day sentence structure and with modern words. So this is a very accessible edition, and then this is an older translation, and it uses a lot of archaic words and also some kind of stilted sentence structure, but all of that is done to make it more similar to the original Old Norse, because a lot of those archaic words are sort of the same words with just different spelling and pronunciation to the Old Norse words. So I've enjoyed sort of cycling between these 2, because this is definitely the more accessible one, but this feels more authentic in a way. So I enjoyed sort of dipping in and out of both of them, although I have mostly been reading this. So, what's the story about? Well, that's a hard question to answer because it's about a lot of people. This is a family saga. It tells the story of the descendants of a man called Kjetil Flatnese, or Kjetil Flatnose, who came to Iceland in the 800s, and he settled there, and we hear all of the stories of things happening to some of his descendants. So as all family sagas, they start with a lengthy list of names. We are introduced to Kjetil and his wife, and then we have family trees just branching off in all directions. And this is very common, but it makes for a bit of a hard reading for a modern day reader who doesn't necessarily know all of these names and doesn't necessarily care about all of these names. It's not the most entertaining start to stories, I would say, unless you are, I guess, a special kind of geek and find this interesting, which I might be, because the fun thing about this is when you start to read multiple sagas, you will start seeing the overlap. You will start recognizing names from other sagas, and you will see how the sagas are all interconnected, telling stories of people that go in and out of each other's life. And that I find quite interesting. So for instance, in this saga, we are introduced to okay, I just realized I don't know the English names of these people, but we are introduced to which we met in the saga of Eric the Red, which we read last year, only then she was called Aud, but it's the same person. It's much debated whether she was an actual historical figure or not. The two different names being one of the things put into this equation. But yeah, we have met her before. We get a more detailed version of her story in this saga. We also see in the listing of names Gunnlaug Wormstongue, whose saga we also read last year. And we also see a lot of mentioning of Egil Skallagrimsson and his son Torstein Egilson, which are sort of the main family in the saga that I'm going to read next, which is Egil's Saga. And look forward to get better acquainted with them, or reacquainted, I should say. That's a reread for me, but yeah, at the end of the month. But yeah, I think that is interesting to just see how all of the stories weave in and out of each other. And of course, when this was written down, those lists of names were important to anchor the stories in reality, because this is not meant to be just works of literature. This is also meant to be history writing. And then academics have been discussing ever since just how much of this is history and how much is pure fiction. Where are the limits of one and the other? And you can never get definite answers to this, but it is assumed that most of the people in this story are historical figures, and that the marriages and deaths and murders in this story actually happened. But then we know that the chronology of things is far off, and then we also know that some parts of the story are myths and legends put into the story, and some of the characters are thought to be fictional. For instance, Melkorka, the mother of Olaf Huskulsson. It is a beautiful work of literature as well, and at the core of this story there is sort of a threesome story between two men and a woman. I'm not going to talk about that part of the story today, because at the point we are now, we are kind of in the midst of that story. So I'm going to leave that for my next video to talk about. And today I just wanted to point at a few other things that I'm noticing when reading this. So one of those things is the importance of family in this society. You see it through the constant listing of names and ancestry and genealogy, because you wouldn't put that into the story if family wasn't important. But you also see it in the way they all are brokering these marriages and how they are using that to gain access to the families that most profits them to have access to. You also see it in how they use this foster care system, where you send your children to live with other families and be brought up by them, as also a way of forging connections with other important families. And I think that is an interesting thing to hear about. And also here you see the hints that it is considered an honor to have someone who is sort of higher than you in the hierarchy foster your children, and that will benefit your children and making it easier for them to get ahead in life. So that's something very alien to us in the modern day world, but it was a very common thing happening here. The other thing is the kind of, well, there's an honor system clearly, but how much of that honor system is built around hospitality? I find that interesting. You see multiple times in this story examples of people being guests of other people, and it's always the most prominent person gives these lavish gifts, and that gives them status and honor because it shows that you have a lot of money. It shows that you are in a position to be able to give these gifts. So that when the Icelandic people, we follow this family, when members of this family goes to Norway, they meet up with prominent people in Norway, and many of them meet different kings throughout the years, and these kings always praise them, and then they send them home with these lavish gifts, sometimes in forms of weapons, and sometimes with ships with all the goods, like trading goods, on the ships as part of their gifts. So these are not meager presents, these are really valuable gifts. And you don't see a lot of it happening the other way around, because it's always the one with the most power who's supposed to give these gifts. And then you see all the stories happening on Iceland, you see that it is used to tell how big these men are, how they have this great position in society, because they are able to invite all of these people into their homes and to send them away with lavish gifts of their own. You also see this when Un is coming to Iceland to meet up with her relatives, when she has two brothers living in Iceland, and the first of them she meets will only accept her and 10 of the men she has with her, and she takes offense at this. And then she goes on to her other brother that will take in her and all of her 20 companions. And so that's the brother she really bonds with, because he invited all of her men, not just half of them. And this is of course also a sign of how much resources you have, because when you invite someone in to stay, it's not like to have dinner with you. They will stay there over winter, and they will live on your resources and food preserves during those months. So being able to invite everybody in is also a sign of how big of a man you are. I also like to read about how when these Icelandic men want to expand their property, they always go to Norway to get timber, because famously there are not that many trees on Iceland, and we have trees in abundance here in Norway, so they come to Norway to get timber. We see that multiple times happening as well. Another thing I found interesting when reading this is the absence of something, and it's the absence of religion at the beginning of this saga, because that usually you usually hear about some of these rituals happening as sort of landmark occasions throughout the year. You usually hear about the midwinter blot, or just these things happening which were events that collected the society. But they are absent from this story, and you only start hearing about religious things as Christianity is making its entrance into Iceland. We hear a little bit about 3 men that are not welcome to any neighborhood they move into, because they are sort of magicians and practicing side, and that is frowned upon and nobody wants them in their vicinity. But that is basically the only kind of mention of anything resembling religion at the beginning of the story, which, you know, I find kind of sad, because that's one of the things I really like about reading the sagas, to see all those hints of that old belief system. But you know, this is written down when both Iceland and Norway were Christian countries, and you certainly see that in the way this is written, in that it just keeps quiet about those pesky old heathen things that you don't want to talk about. I also noticed another little thing, and that's at the beginning of the story, when people are coming to Iceland, they just settle wherever their boat takes them, and there is just plenty of land around to take. That's yours for the taking if you go there. But as the story progresses, as time progresses, it starts to get more and more people around. You start to get into land disputes and heritage disputes, and you also start buying property off each other. So that's kind of nice to be there on this journey of the settlement of Iceland, to see it progress over time. So I think I'm actually going to leave it there for today, with those rambling, random thoughts I had while reading the first half of this saga. And I'll continue on talking about it next week once I have finished it. I will have more things to say. I have proved to myself that I could literally talk about this for more than an hour, because I did, and then I deleted the video because I don't want videos on my channel to be that long. But yeah, I still have a lot of things to say. I'm just gonna save some of them for next week. So I hope you will join me then as well, and I hope you will check out all of the other hosts' videos, and let me know what you think and whether you have ever read sagas or are tempted to do so now. So until next time, bye bye.